Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to discuss about methods and sources of finance. Right? So, in the capital area, the companies generally used to mobilize funds from different sources. Those sources may be from the share capital, or otherwise maybe from the bank loans, or otherwise may mobilize funds from the through debentures. Likewise, various sources are there. So here, these all the methods and sources of finance today we are going to discuss. So in that entire methods and sources of finance chart I have presented here. So methods and sources of finance. The methods and sources of finance can be divided into three types. First one, long term finance. Second one, medium term finance. Third one, short term finance. Right? So these long-term finance, medium-term finance and short-term finance are called as the methods of finance. Sources means each area, some of the sub-points are there. These all are called the sources of finance. Right? So here, if you take the long-term finance, long-term means greater than 3 years. Period which has more than 3 years is called the long term finance. If period is between 1 to 3 years, that is called the medium term finance. Less than 1 year period represent short term finance. Right? So here long term more than 3 years, medium term between 1 to 3 years, and short term less than 1 year period. So here if you come towards a particularly long term more than 3 years of period, there are some sources for that. They are, look at here, own capital, second one share capital, third one retained profits, fourth one long term loans, fifth one debentures. Right? Own capital, share capital, retained profits, long term loans and debentures. Own capital in the sense owners own amount. Right? Own capital represents owners own amount. Not necessary to explain much more about it. So here second one, share capital. Share capital is also called as, that means owner's capital. Right? The share capital can be divided into two types. First one is equity shares and second one is preference shares. There is a difference between the equity shares and the preference shares. Equity shares are the real owners of the company. They having the voting right, as well as if company gets the losses, they are the bearable persons. Though if company gets the abnormal profits, they are eligible to get the profits. Whereas if you come towards the preference shares are the capital. There is a preference in paying the fixed dividend. Right? You need to remember fixed dividend. Even though company gets crores and crores rupees profit, only that fixed dividend will be paid to the preference shareholders. So whenever losses comes, so at that moment the preference shareholders are not responsible for that. Entire responsibility goes to the equity shareholders. That's why the equity shareholders are the real owners of the company. Right? So here this is the second one. Third one, retained profits. Retained profits means here generally individual families area some other amount will be there, that is the entire that amount area they used to save certain amount for future needs. Similarly in the companies also they used to save certain profits for the future needs. That is nothing but the retained earnings, right? Actually, that earnings need to be distributed to the equity shareholders, but for future purpose, they used to save that amount. So that is also one of the source for the business people whenever capital is necessary to utilize. Next here, long term loans. Next here, long term loans. Long term loans means
Here.
generally from the banks, people used to borrow money for the long term purposes. Banks used to, IDBI is their Industrial Development Bank of India. Not only that, lot of MSME, likewise lot of government organizations and other financial institutions are there to provide loan to the companies. So these loans are having the companies need to pay the interest to them. So this is about the long term loans. Long term loans means loans from banks or otherwise any other financial institutions. For the long term loans, people used to pay the interest, whereas the equity shareholders, they will pay the dividend. Next here, last point in the long term area, that is debentures. Debentures in the sense,
Action.
debentures in the sense, this is nothing but the promissory note issued by the company to the public. That means whenever individuals want money, they used to get that means take money from his friends or otherwise colleagues or otherwise relatives. For them, they will give the proof promissory note. That means likewise, whenever companies want money, companies also has a right to issue the debentures. For them, the companies is to pay the interest. So these are all the points which mentioned the long-term sources of finance.
Stop.
Next to here, medium term finance. Medium term finance in the sense, medium term finance in the sense, the time period consists of between 1 to 3 years. So here in the medium term finance area, bank loans, hire purchase, leasing or renting will be there.
Stop.
Right? So here first one is bank loans. Bank loans is available in the long run as well as medium term area as well as in the short term area. Bank can provide to the companies whenever they want, wherever they want. So medium term, if companies brought loans from the banks between 1 to 3 years period, then we can say that is nothing but the bank loans which consider come under the medium term finance. So here secondly we have hire purchase. Hire purchase means whenever the companies don't have proper money with them, in such cases they will brought they will brought missionaries or otherwise any others from other people on installment basis, right? So initially some down payment will be there, then later every quarterly or otherwise half yearly they will pay the rest of the amounts. That installment payment based is nothing but the hire purchase. Lastly, in the medium term area, that is the leasing or renting. Leasing or renting means generally whenever company has no proper funds to purchase a plant or otherwise any other big machineries, in such cases they will broad, that means they will take that particular plant for the lease. So every year certain amount of money used to be paid to that particular owner of that plants. So this is also one of the best method to manage the finance.
Start.
Here last one, short term finance. So short term finance consists of less than 1 year period. So less than 1 year period in the sense, that is the commercial, first one commercial papers, trade credit, bank overdraft, and advances from the customers are there. Now we will discuss in detail about them.
Start.
So here, if you take the first one in the short term area, commercial papers. So commercial papers, in the sense, that means companies can release the commercial papers like debentures in the shop for the short term financial requirements. That means short term financial requirements mean repayment may be less than 365 days, 185, 180 days, or 90 days, or whatever it may be, less than 365 days. But the one condition is there: debentures can be issued by the company without any approval from the any other statutory bodies. But whenever they want to issue the commercial papers, Securities Exchange Board of India SEBI need to give approval to that particular company, because within short period they need to repay that amount. That's why they should get the approval from the SEBI. Then only they need to release that particular commercial papers. This is also one of the wonderful source for the finance, getting the finance for the short term finance. Next to that, trade credit will be there. So here trade credit, in the sense, whenever we are buying the raw materials, we won't pay the immediately amounts. We will ask them 90 days credit period, right? So after 90 days we will pay them. Likewise, always 90-day credit is there with us. This is also one of the manageable credit in the part of the sources of finance. Next to that, here bank overdraft. Bank overdraft, in the sense, generally companies can that means draw, or otherwise company can access the service withdrawal amount more than their available amount. For example, if bank area zero balance is there, we are not allowed to draw any other minus balance. But companies has that overdraft facility. That means whenever they want to draw less minus values also, they can draw for their business purposes. Whenever amount recover, then they will balance that one. For that, banks are going to charge certain fixed interest rates. So likewise,
Bank.
that's why bank overdrafts will be maintained. Lastly, here, next to here, advances from the customers. Advances from the customers, in the sense, generally before selling itself, we used to ask the customers to pay some advances. For example, you can take the Tata Nano car. Whenever they have issued, due to the heavy demand, they asked the customer to pay, that means to book the car along with the some other customer advance. That means they need to pay certain amount to register it. So on the basis of that, they can mobilize certain funds. So here what you need to remember, in the sense, mainly for the companies, there are three methods of the finance. They are long term, medium term, and short term. Under each method there are lot of sources of finance. So generally the firms can utilize any one of these opportunities to get the funds as per their requirement. Methods and sources of finance concept is very important for the company's perspective, as well as for the student's point of view. This is also very important for the examination purpose. So what you should do, in this sense, you should have thorough knowledge on this particular concept to get clear cut idea on this. Nowadays the companies might be use some different sources also to get the finance. So we will discuss that entire things in the future videos.